Imagine a world where drug prices don't just go down. They go down 1,000%. That's right, 1,000%. According to former President Trump, this isn't a dream, it's a deal. And apparently, basic math is optional. Today, we're breaking down the numbers, the claims, and the chaos behind the headlines. And trust me, you won't want to miss how Trump math works in real life. When former President Donald Trump announced a new deal with a British drug company to lower medication costs, he didn't just promise modest reductions. No, in true Trump fashion, he claimed that prices would drop 100%, 400%, 600%, even 1,000% in some cases. Now, for anyone who went to math class past grade 3, this is, well, impossible. Let's break it down. A 100% price reduction means a drug that costs $100 would cost $0. That's the maximum a price can drop before it literally disappears. But Trump's 1,000% claim, that would imply that not only would the drug be free, the drug company would pay the patient $1,000 to take it. Imagine getting a paycheck from Pfizer or GlaxoSmithKline every time you swallowed a pill. Sounds great for consumers, but it's pure fantasy in the world of economics. Jason Easley, a journalist at Politicus UA, didn't mince words. He called Trump's repeated use of this number a sign of an apparent growing inability to form thoughts. And if you watch the press conference clip, it's hard to argue. Trump barrels through the figures with confidence, as if he's reading from a script written by a cartoonist who loves hyperbola more than math. Economists quickly shredded the 1,000% claim, pointing out that it's not just improbable, it's mathematically nonsensical in the real world. Businesses cannot lower prices beyond zero and expect to survive. The logic of supply production, costs, and profit margins all collapse under a 1,000% price reduction. In short, it's a number that exists purely in the fantasy economy of Trump world, humor aside. The repetition of 1,000% also reveals a deeper pattern in communication. Instead of giving concrete, realistic numbers, the emphasis is on shock value and spectacle. It's not about informing the public, it's about making headlines and sounding historic. And in this case, the headlines were indeed historic, just not for the right reasons. In many ways, this episode is emblematic of Trump's relationship with numbers, big, bold, and often defying reality. It's a mix of bravado and confusion, a combination that leaves the public and journalists scratching their heads. And while it's tempting to laugh, it also raises questions. If the math doesn't add up here, what other policy promises are equally ungrounded? By the end of the day, Trump's 1,000% claim is more than just a gaffe. This, a lesson in critical thinking. It reminds us that numbers matter, that claims should be scrutinized, and that even the most confident statements deserve a little arithmetic reality check. And let's be honest, it's also kind of funny imagining a world where Big Pharma writes you a check every time you take your meds. When Donald Trump claimed that drug prices could drop by 1,000%, it didn't take long for economists, journalists, and policy experts to weigh in, and not with praise. The consensus was clear. The numbers simply don't add up. And the claim is a glaring example of fuzzy math that undermines public trust in policy announcements. Economists were quick to point out that a reduction beyond 100% is mathematically impossible. In reality, lowering prices to zero is already the extreme limit. Any percentage beyond that would require pharmaceutical companies to pay consumers to take their products, a scenario that exists only in satire or alternate universes. As one analyst put it, the statement exemplifies a misunderstanding of basic economic principles and the logic of supply and demand. Journalists also jumped on the story. Jason Easley from Politicus UA hailed it not just the mathematical impossibility, but what he sees as a broader pattern in Trump's communications. Easley called it a sign of a growing inability to form coherent thoughts, pointing out that repeated overstatements like this are less about policy and more about spectacle. In other words, the claim is headline bait, not a serious economic plan. Even within mainstream media, commentators were skeptical. Many used humor to illustrate the absurdity. Imagine a patient going to the pharmacy only to be handed a check from the drug company for taking a pill. While it's funny to picture, the joke goes the disconnect between Trump's statements and economic reality. The White House initially defended the 1,000% claim, asserting that the administration's approach would achieve unprecedented reductions in drug costs. But policy analysts quickly pointed out that the announcement lacked mechanisms or calculations to support such an extreme figure. It wasn't just ambitious, it was fundamentally unmoored from reality. Beyond economists and journalists, public perception also played a role. Social media users quickly created memes and threads, exaggerating the concept of Trump math for comedic effect. While entertaining, this reaction reflected a deeper frustration when policy promises defy logic in decision-making processes. Ultimately, the expert backlash serves as a cautionary tale. Bold claims without clear evidence invite ridicule, weaken credibility, and distract from substantive policy discussion. The lesson is simple. Numbers matter, whether it's healthcare, economics, or politics. Exaggerated claims may capture attention, but they also invite scrutiny, sometimes harsher than intended for viewers. This moment is both humorous and instructive. It's a reminder to critically evaluate statements from public figures, particularly those involving complex economic topics. And in the case of Trump's 1,000% claim, the tie is obvious. Always check the math before taking headlines at face value. Beyond the math, some observers began asking a more serious question. Are these claims a reflection of policy overreach or something deeper, an possible sign of cognitive decline? Jason Easley, reporting for Politicus USA, described Trump's repeated exaggerations and numeritan inconsistencies. While critics often poke fun at his speeches, transcripts reveal patterns that can be dismissed as mere exaggeration. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker went further, publicly suggesting that Trump might be exhibiting signs of dementia and urging his family to intervene. Pritzker expressed concern that the president needed mental health support, highlighting the potential real-world implications of cognitive decline in a national leader. I genuinely think there is something wrong with him, Pritzker said. I wish that his family would intervene because they are benefiting from his failure of mental health. While some may scoff at these claims, the repeated incoherence in statements, like promising 1,000% reductions in drug prices, cease not just a media curiosity. It points to a pattern where logic, numbers, and reality become inconsistent, creating a disconnect between rhetoric and feasibility. In other words, when basic math becomes optional in public statements, it's worth considering whether deeper issues are at play. Humor often helps digest these moments. Watching a press conference where the former president confidently touts impossible figures can feel like observing a cartoon version of reality, where laws of arithmetic don't exist and logic takes a coffee break. But laughter doesn't erase the concern. If cognitive difficulties are genuine, they could affect decision-making on policy, healthcare, and national security. It's also worth noting how this pattern feeds into public perception. Repeatedly making statements that defy reality can erode confidence, create confusion, and fuel political polarization. Critics argue that unchecked cognitive strain in a leader has consequences far beyond headlines or memes. It can shape legislation, influence markets, and even affect international relations. For viewers, this chapter is a reminder that the human element behind policy statements matters. Numbers and claims are abstract. They're tied to judgment, reasoning, and mental clarity. While satire and humor make the story engaging, the stakes remain high when a national leader struggles to align words with logic. Ultimately, Trump's 1,000% claim is more than a math problem. It's a lens through which to examine patterns of thought, communication, and possible cognitive stress. Whether interpreted as political theatrics, personality quirks, or warning signs of mental decline, it does the importance of scrutinizing statements critically, understanding the human behind the headlines, and keeping a careful eye on how leadership intersects with mental health. After analyzing the numbers, the expert reactions, and the possible cognitive concerns, it's time to step back and ask, what can we actually learn from Trump's 1,000% claim? Beyond the math, beyond the memes, there are several takeaways for viewers, journalists, and anyone trying to navigate political communication in the modern age. First and foremost, numbers matter. Whether it's drug prices, unemployment rates, or budget projections, the figures leaders quote are just decoration. They reflect policy feasibility. A claim like 1,000% price reduction isn't just funny. It's a red flag that critical thinking and arithmetic should never be optional when evaluating political statements. For educators and citizens alike, this is a reminder to always double-check the math before taking headlines at face value. Second, this episode highlights the power and peril of spectacle over substance. Trump's announcement drew attention, media coverage, and social media buzz, but the spectacle often overshadowed the practical details of policy implementation. In other words, bold claims may capture headlines, but they don't necessarily solve real-world problems. The lesson: look beyond flashy numbers to the underlying logic, or lack thereof. Humor also plays a vital role in processing these moments. Visualizing a world where pharmaceutical companies write you checks for taking pills is absurd. It's a playful way to engage audiences while underscoring the impossible nature of the claim. Satire, memes, and jokes make the story memorable and shareable, while also reinforcing critical insights. In a sense, comedy becomes a tool for public literacy. It entertains, informs, and encourages skepticism all at once. Additionally, the discussion of potential cognitive strain reminds us that human factors matter in leadership. Whether it's mental fatigue, stress, or more serious conditions, a leader's ability to think clearly, communicate accurately, and make reasoned decisions directly affects public trust and policy outcomes. While humor lightens the narrative, it should not overshadow the very real stakes involved in governance. Finally, the 1000% episode serves as a cautionary tale for consumers of news. Verify, question, and contextualize. Headlines may shock, amuse, or provoke outrage, but understanding the story behind the numbers and the person delivering them be essential. Critical thinking isn't optional. It's the best way to separate satire from substance, hype from reality. In conclusion, Trump's 1000% claim is more than a math gaffe. It's a lesson in arithmetic, media literacy, human psychology, and humor for viewers. It's an invitation to laugh, learn, and think critically. And for content creators like us, it's a reminder that reporting the news with wit, insight, and accuracy can engage audiences while giving them the tools to make sense of a world where numbers, claims, and reality don't always line up. So the next time you hear a number that seems too big or too small, do be true. Remember, check the math, enjoy the absurdity, and never underestimate the power of a good meme.